Ohio State engineering alumnus Michael Triplett is what you would call a serial biotech entrepreneur. Today, he is co-founder and board chair of Armatus Bio, a diversified multi-asset gene and cell therapy company, as well as co-founder and board member of Clarametyx Biosciences, a startup infectious disease company pursuing novel therapeutics and vaccines for the treatment and prevention of biofilm-related bacterial infections. Not so long ago, he co-founded and served as president and CEO of Myonexus Therapeutics, a clinical stage gene therapy company developing first ever treatments for limb-girdle muscular dystrophies. Myonexus was acquired by Sarepta Therapeutics for more than $225 million in April 2019. Excelling at the interfaces of business and innovation, Michael is passionate about translating world-class science and technology into transformative businesses, products, and capabilities that enhance human health and economic opportunity. He focuses on life sciences technology ventures, innovation, technology-based economic development, and STEM education for students of all backgrounds. I am delighted that he's joining us today on Enginuity.
Thank you, Dean Howard. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you are the second of several alumni we'll be chatting with on our Enginuity Entrepreneur Tour. Ratmir Timashev was our first. I asked him if there was a something or someone that inspired him to become an entrepreneur. So I like this answer so much that I decided that to lead off each of our entrepreneur episodes, I'm going to lead with that question. Do you have a eureka moment or a special influence in your life that led you to your entrepreneurship?
I do. It's a great question for me, and it really stems from two distinct influences. One is experiential, growing up in East Liverpool, Ohio. At the time, the industrial base was eroding, and it had a profound impact on my childhood, but also on that community. And here we are 30 some plus years later, and it's an incredibly socioeconomically disadvantaged community at this point. And I tried to understand why and how that happened, and that led me to the path of innovation. And always trying to be at the front end of innovation is how I wanted to position myself in my communities to prevent that collapse happening to those around me and my own family. And then secondly, while I was advancing in my career at Battelle, I have a mentor by the name of Tom Curley. Tom taught in the MBA program. He had built an energy MBA program on behalf of the College of Business here at Ohio State. Tom retired as global president of Rolls-Royce's energy business. He had grown up in GE, aircraft and aerospace over the years. And Tom, he and I were having conversations about where I wanted to go in my career at this point as I was ascending the ladder at Battelle, Tom gave me the advice, which was really, really impactful, that if you want to create generational wealth for yourself and your family, there are two pathways that he knew, and he encouraged me to explore which one I wanted to pursue. One, becoming an executive of a publicly traded company, or two, building your own company. And up until that point in time, I was not thinking about the financial aspect and impact. I was just building my career with my wife and having a lovely suburban living. And that grabbed me for some reason. And I'm not materialistic or don't think of myself as being materially driven as an individual, but I thought that was a profound insight from somebody who too grew up from a modest background like myself. So that was a pivot point for me to start exploring more of the entrepreneurial side of innovation.
So I love the fact that you started your story about seeing a need and thinking about innovation of addressing that need, and then coupling that with mentorship. And I always say that one of the things about being a student here is that you always run into these faculty and these educators that guide students along the way, even though they may not necessarily know until, a few years later. And then they're like, oh, that was actually good advice. So thinking about your career, when you started, after earning your bachelor's and PhD in chemical engineering here, you went into the corporate world. You mentioned Battelle, for example. But tell us a little a little bit more about that part of your journey. Like, why did you decided? Like, what brought you even to thinking about corporate world? We know you deviated into the entrepreneur world, but kind of understand your motivation.
Great question, and it completely parallels what I just mentioned about growing up in East Liverpool, Ohio. I actually went to work at Procter and Gamble after my bachelor's for 2.5 or 3 years in Cincinnati, recruited by legendary alumnus of the college here, Nancy Dawes, to join Procter and Gamble's research and development organization. And I tell everybody in that 2.5 or 3 year period after my bachelor's that I learned my experiential innovation MBA. I knew I was driven to wanting to be at the cutting edge, but Procter taught me how to do innovation. What Procter would not let me do was do innovation in the pharmaceutical business that they had, under which is pretty typical in the pharmaceutical and biotech space. The level of expertise that's required to advance the innovation agenda often requires an advanced degree. And that motivated me to return to Ohio State to pursue my doctorate in chemical engineering. I studied lipid nanoparticle engineering, or did my research on that. And that led me into the world of therapeutic innovation, particularly with the drug delivery emphasis.
So I love the fact that you mentioned you basically like, yeah, you're not going to let me do it. I'm going to figure out how to do it anyway. And you brought you back here to Ohio State, which I think is wonderful. And so you have your PhD, you're looking at these therapeutic innovations, drug delivery. Okay, so here in Procter & Gamble, PhD, let's talk a little bit about that first true entrepreneurial effort, and basically your first startup.
Sure. Absolutely. It's not one that I founded. It was actually Ventera Pharmaceuticals, which Battelle had spun out a respiratory drug delivery device that Battelle and along with pharmaceutical partners were interested in developing into the market and to advance the respiratory therapeutic space for low inspiratory volume patients, particularly like COPD, et cetera, where existing technologies place an undue burden upon them. And after turning down some faculty interviews, I took one faculty interview at Carnegie Mellon and realized that I wanted to be more applied, back to the innovation. I wanted to be real world translational applied at the cutting edge. And serendipitously, Battelle's technology that they'd spun out into Ventera Pharmaceuticals was the exact same core technology that I had used in my graduate work to make lipid nanoparticles. And I had anticipated that I would leave Ohio and go to the coast, but because of that fortuitous convergence of technologies in my research interest, I walked across the street, or actually over in Grandview, and joined Ventera Pharmaceuticals and led pharmaceutical development, formulation development for that startup. And despite tens of millions of dollars of investment, like many startups, it failed. But I was hooked on that, what I call the libertarian view of innovation. To me, same process I learned at Procter & Gamble. Strategic context was different. Corporate environment, startup environment. How you competed for resources was different in a corporate context of budgeting and prioritization versus raising money from venture capital. Same technical process, different strategic business context. And I was drawn to that because of the lack of bureaucracy, if you will, and the speed at which I could operate or the team could move.
Okay, so you caught the innovation bug early on that transformed into the startup bug. First experience was you joined basically a spinoff. So let's talk about that I would say the epiphany of, you know what, I actually want to co-found my own. So your most successful venture to date has been Myonexus Therapeutics. Am I right?
That is correct.
All right. So let's dive into that one.
Twofold answer to why I wanted to found my own company. One, we already referenced in Tom Curley, the guidance there. From a financial perspective, if we're going to do the work, we should be rewarded for it. And that was profound. And then two, once Once I understood the process, being an engineer, I understood the process. Then it was easy for me to envision building the product around the process. And that was a somewhat naive view until you actually go out and do it. You don't really know what you don't know, but I had enough self-confidence and enough encouragement and support, including from my wife, Nanette, and friends and mentors like Tom or folks like Alex Fisher, former trustee here at Ohio State, with whom I worked at Battelle. I had no fear about taking that leap and building my own. Myonexus Therapeutics is a gene therapy company that I co-founded with colleagues at Nationwide Children's Hospital and a parent of a muscular dystrophy patient from San Francisco. And we formed the company in 2017 and raised $2.5 million in essentially a pre-seed or seed round. And less than 2 years later, we sold the company for over $225 million. We never did a Series A because Sarepta Therapeutics gave us an option agreement, which we used non-dilutively to fund our Series A in the company. So the returns were rather impressive for folks, and most importantly about Sarepta, two things. One, they're likely to have the first limb-girdle program approved by the FDA within the next 12 to 18 months. And patients globally who have never had any treatment option will now have a treatment option. And then two, Sarepta now has nearly 300 people in Columbus, Ohio at an R&D center of excellence in Easton. And to me, it's a great example of technology-based economic development.
So this is a great story of providing and having generational wealth personally, but also really impacting the world and people's lives.
Absolutely. There's a saying in biotech, it's not unique to biotech, but doing well but doing good.
I like that.
And I think we all should aspire to that. There's nothing more rewarding from an ROI than seeing your work and your team's work positively impacting people and their families.
And so thinking about your time then as a student, I'm going to put out a hypothesis, which I already know is true, but I believe that when you were a student here, entrepreneurship wasn't, I would say, prioritized like it was at other schools. But I think we're doing much better now with efforts like our Integrated Business and Engineering program, our role in the current Entrepreneurial Engineering Network, and the Keenan Center for Entrepreneurship, which I know you're involved in. But I know that there's so much more. And so when you think about your path, your journey, your experience, and then also your experience where you're here as a student, what else does Ohio State need to do to encourage and inspire more Ratmir Timashevs and Mike Tripletts?
Good question. Partly, I was unaware of entrepreneurship, didn't really understand business growing up with my background as a first-generation college student. The university, to your point, was not encouraging much of the entrepreneurial and innovation mindset or educational curricular activities at that time. Today, we're doing a much better job. There's no doubt. Between the Keenan Center, as you referenced, the Entrepreneurship and Innovation minor that has been launched in the past few years. Integrated Business and Engineering is a fantastic program. I'd love to be able to scale that and add capacity there because those students are top notch. And so I would encourage students to lean in and others to lean into the minor that exists today. But from a systems level view, if we want to improve our translational and entrepreneurial activity around the university, one, there's education, which we seem to be taking strong strides in that direction. Two, it's I think engaging alumni to mentor, to advise not only faculty, graduate students, but undergrads as well. And then we need to, in my opinion, what I've seen, whether it's at Lawrence Livermore, Oak Ridge, Nationwide Children's Hospital, some of these high-performing organizations in this translational and venture space, we need to build out translational pre-commercialization de-risking capabilities around areas where we have a right to win. Where I've seen it work best, those institutions have internal investment dollars and they have an investment committee that is typically comprised of external people like myself and internal people within the institution, and faculty, or particularly faculty grad students, will bring their ideas to the table from a translational standpoint toward commercialization. And that investment committee gets to, in the process, they would advise them on how to make their research work more commercially viable. And two, we could award dollars and other institutions award dollars to do certain proof of concept or prototyping, whatever the next set of experiments or work that needs to be addressed to answer a risk that exists, or to prove out a hypothesis or a system.
So you mentioned the three things: education. We're growing. We have a positive trajectory. Engaging alumni like yourself. We're doing better at that, and I think alumni are very much excited to come back and share their experience. This de-risking, that's the hard one. And if you think about the de-risking, the difference between research in the lab versus on the bench outside, I actually like that idea of using resources, alumni, to help de-risk. That might actually work. And now we have to just convince someone to pay for it.
Exactly.
So thinking about all of this, thinking you were a first generation student, imagine if you could have the Mike Triplett of today go back to the Mike Triplett of yesterday. Talk about current students. Can you give them some advice that you wish you had received as a 20, 21, 22-year-old?
Absolutely. I look at opportunities to join student groups like Business Builders on campus. That's the entrepreneurship group. I encourage that. I would look at the entrepreneurship and innovation minor. And then I would also seek out opportunities to do internships at venture capital funds, such as Ohio Innovation Fund, Rev One Ventures, Drive Capital, and others. And also, once you have something to offer an early stage company, seek opportunities even to shadow. Ideally, do internships where you can do product development or process development or research on behalf of those companies. And you'll be surprised at how many of those companies really want to engage students, undergraduate and graduate students, early and often, to get fresh set of eyes on what they're doing, a new perspective, but also to build that talent pipeline in the future.
So you heard it here, and if you didn't, please rewind and listen again. Rewind, listen again, because that's some great advice. And I think all of these, you can choose one, you could choose two, you could choose multiple, but just like with you, it provides a journey to get from point zero to hopefully being acquired by another company, or maybe even going IPO, who knows?
Exactly.
Okay, so ask you personally, what's now and what's next for you? And can Buckeye Nation help in any way?
I appreciate that. And currently I am, as we mentioned earlier, co-founder and board chair of Armatus Bio, a gene therapy company. We're actively raising venture capital to move our two gene therapy programs from the preclinical stage to clinical trials. I am on the board and co-founder of Clarametyx Biosciences. That's a clinical stage infectious disease company. That's a very exciting opportunity for not only the team, but the region. And that company also headquartered here in Columbus. And I'm also co-founder of Nucor Bio, which is an Ohio State biomedical engineering technology. It's a non-viral genetic medicine company out of the BME program here at Ohio State. It's a very compelling opportunity. It's earlier stage platform technology, but I'm most excited about it as far as the broad applicability and utility of that technology and how it's extremely cutting edge. So more to come on Nucor Bio as we move forward. And I'm also chair of the Ohio Life Sciences Association, trade association driving the life sciences industry forward here in the state. I'm on the board of Alumnus Biosciences, which is in the Innovation District. It's a gene therapy manufacturing company spun out of Nationwide Children's Hospital. I'm on the Innovate Ohio Executive Committee for Lieutenant Governor John Husted, and we spend most of our time discussing how to drive more innovation and innovation-based economic development in the state, with a central interest in the innovation districts and AI and other emerging technologies as well. So I'm staying very busy these days, trying to build the systems. That is where I'm at now in my career. I know how to build these individual opportunities like Armatus or Nucor. I am most interested in building the systems, take a systems engineering view of this innovation ecosystem. How do we create a high-performing system that integrates education to policy to venture capital to move everybody forward?
And you also mentor our students.
I do.
So you really do function like an academic. It sounded like you had 10 to 15 jobs based on that list, and I'm sure there's things that you didn't even mention.
Systems. I'm trying to build systems.
Well, I really thank you for sharing your advice, sharing your story as an entrepreneur, as a Buckeye, and really showcasing what it means to take your education and your knowledge and your engineering know-how and make it a reality to help others, especially in the healthcare space. I want to say thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for your leadership.
Thanks for listening to Enginuity. Stay up to date on all the amazing innovation and groundbreaking research happening within The Ohio State University College of Engineering by connecting with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and X.